you could have someone in full drag, but they'd have to use the men's restroom, which makes absolutely no sense.
Meet Palle Bo, a digital nomad from Denmark on an epic journey around the world.
My name is Palle Bo, and I'm a long-time radio producer. In 2013, I started planning to become a digital nomad and a full-time traveler. 3 years later, I had sold my house, my car, and all my furniture. And in July 2016, I set out on a quest to visit every country in the world. In this podcast, I'm taking you along on my journey. And I'm sharing my ups and downs and let you listen in to conversations with some interesting people I meet along the way.
This is the Radiovagabond podcast.
I'm in High Point, North Carolina, a small city known as the furniture capital of the world. Not only do they have the biggest furniture store, they also host a big furniture market twice a year, where the small city almost gets doubled in people. 70 to 80,000 people come here for the event. Another thing that High Point is known for is making the iconic American yellow school buses. My name is Palle Bo. This is episode 84 of the Radiovagabond podcast. I'm house sitting here in High Point for a month. I was connected to Davina, the owner of a house, 2 dogs, and a lot of plants via the site trustedhousesitters.com. After the first week, Davina came back to the house and asked me to drive her to Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, a few hours north of High Point.
I am Davina van Buren, resident of High Point, North Carolina.
And I thought that would be a good time to chat to her about the city, the state, and herself. Where does the Van Buren come from? Is it Dutch or...?
It is Dutch, and funny story about Van Buren, I was not born Van Buren. My last name was Newby.
Was
Newby, N-E-W-B-Y. Stupid.
And now you're not a newbie anymore.
Nope, exactly. There was a very famous newspaper columnist here in the States, and her column was called Dear Abby. And her name was Abigail Van Buren, and I always thought that was so regal. So I changed my name 10 years ago.
It's Van Buren, even though there's not a drop of Dutch blood in you.
Nope.
No.
Shout out to the Dutch people.
Let me just set the scene. Here we are in a beautiful landscape. We're on the way to where you're going for the next couple of weeks in Virginia, and this is quite the beautiful scenery we're going through. Not that there's anything wrong with North Carolina. You live in High Point, North Carolina, and that's where I'm living. I'm taking care of your dogs, which are with us here in the car, and I'll be doing that for the next couple of weeks while you're doing a house sit in Virginia.
Yes, with my own dog and 2 cats.
Okay. So tell me about. I've been in High Point for about a week now, so I know a little bit of what it's like. But tell me and the listeners what kind of place is High Point?
Okay, High Point is known as North Carolina's international city, and that's because we are the home of the International Home Furnishings Market. It happens twice a year in April and October, and High Point has about 110,000 people. 70 to 80,000 come just for the furniture market, so our town almost doubles in size during that time.
And they come from all over the world?
They come from all over the world. Designers, furniture makers, celebrities who have furniture lines like Rachel Ray and Martha Stewart, the twins who have that home improvement show, the Property Twins, I think they're called, were there last year. Basically any designer who's anyone will send people to the shows, or they might even have a showroom in High Point.
How did that come about? I noticed there's a lot of furniture manufacturing in High Point, but it's weird that this little place in North Carolina has this big event twice a year.
It is kind of weird, and honestly, I should know the history of the furniture market better than I do. I do know that textiles were really big in the 50s. There was a lot of textile manufacturing in the area, and also in Greensboro, the neighboring town. But I'm not sure about the furniture, why it was North Carolina that had all this. Maybe we had a lot of wood or something. I'll have to do some research on that.
How in the world can you house that many people? Well, I guess a lot of people they stay in Greensboro, which is pretty close and a little bit bigger. But I don't see any big hotels. I see a ton of fast food, but not so much hotels.
Maybe they're sleeping at the Bojangles.
Yeah, maybe. Open 24 hours.
We have a lot of hotels out by the airport, which is sort of on the border of Greensboro and High Point. There's tons of big chain hotels out there, and there's a lot of hotels in Greensboro. And some people that come to Furniture Market even stay as far away as Lexington or even Charlotte, which is an hour away.
So apart from these two times of the year with the furniture market, what kind of town? What's the feel of High Point?
That's a great question. I am from North Carolina and lived in Greensboro for 7 years. And even though High Point is right there, it's only 15 minutes away. I just never really came there that much. What I have noticed about High Point since living there for almost a year is it's a very blue-collar town. There's a lot of different nationalities. It's almost like, you know how big cities like New York and San Francisco have their Chinatown or Koreatown. I don't think we have big Asian populations, but we do have a lot of Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Mexican, and for example, in my neighborhood, as you've seen, just in my little 2-block neighborhood, we have Dominican, Thai, Mexican, Jamaican, black, white, and that's just in 2 blocks.
Yeah.
So it's very mixed. It's very diverse. And there is a lot of old money in High Point. We're one of the only cities on the East Coast that actually has a Bentley dealership, which is kind of out of place on our little main street. So there is old money there, but we're just not flashy with it.
No.
And let's see what else. Other than that, yeah, lots of blue-collar people, manufacturing.
Yeah, you told me that you do school buses.
Oh, yes. So one of the biggest companies that we have in High Point is Thomas built school buses. And Thomas makes almost all the school and activity buses.
The typical yellow buses. Yeah.
Exactly.
That is so weird.
Yeah, it's right there, right down the street from our house.
North Carolina is Davina's home state, and she loves it.
Oh, yes. And I lived here for 4 years before moving to Colorado. And I was in Colorado for 6 years and then Mexico for 1 year and chose to come home. I love my state. We often get a bad rap, especially the past couple of years. Politically, we've been in the news for things like HB2, also known as the bathroom bill.
Oh yeah, for the listeners who don't know about what that is, can you explain it?
Yes, it was an idiotic law proposed by our Republican legislature that basically said people had to use the restroom that corresponded with their sex at birth.
At birth.
At birth. So, for example, you could have someone in full drag, but they'd have to use the men's restroom, which makes absolutely no sense. And also, as far as I know, and everything I've read and researched, I don't think it's really I don't think people are getting assaulted in the restroom by transgender people. No, I've never heard of that. No. Yeah, it was just purely a political thing that cost North Carolina a lot of money, billions of dollars. The NCAA didn't have the basketball tournament here, and we've had that for many years.
They just pulled out?
They pulled out. A lot of the furniture companies didn't, and the designers did not come to Furniture Market. Architectural Digest has a huge party for the market every year. They didn't do their party. PayPal was going to open up a facility in Charlotte that would have made 800 jobs for the locals there, and they decided not to do it. They said, we can't do this. Our employees might not be safe there. So anyway, we have gotten a bad rap in the past couple of years, and I just want people to know that everyone in North Carolina does not think like that. There's a lot of open-minded, this is a very diverse place, and most people are very sweet and charming, and we love putting on the Southern hospitality. And what I want people to know also is, tourism-wise, it's a wonderful choice because you can drive from one end of the state to the other, from the Blue Ridge Mountains to our gorgeous beaches, in about 7 hours. So you could traverse the whole state in one day. And we have beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains, and the area in the middle of the state is known as the Piedmont, which has a lot of rolling hills. And then as you go east, it gets flatter until you get to the ocean. And we have beautiful coastlines that are in a lot of movies. Up until a few years ago, Wilmington, North Carolina was number 3 in film revenue of the whole United States.
Oh, really?
That was probably about a decade maybe ago. Yeah. And we had a lot of incentives for people to make movies here. And since the Republican legislature came into power, they have killed a lot of those incentives, and also sent that business to now Atlanta is a very popular movie place. But our coastline can look like a lot of different places. We have some rocky places and some bluffs, and it's very versatile as far as film goes.
So some of the stuff that I need to see while I'm here, of course, I need to go to Asheville in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yes, you do. And as a matter of fact, in about 12 miles, we're going to turn on the Blue Ridge Parkway. And the Blue Ridge Parkway goes all the way from Cherokee, North Carolina, all the way up through Virginia, and it connects with another beautiful parkway called Skyline Drive. I think the Blue Ridge Parkway is maybe a couple hundred miles. Yes, Asheville is definitely one of our most popular tourist towns. I believe Asheville's about 80,000 people now. And for a small town, it really has a lot going on. It's got a wonderful music scene, tons of art galleries, and awesome restaurants. Everyone should check out Asheville if given the chance.
This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotels and guest houses and hostels around the world in one simple search. Hotels25.com. It's best price guaranteed.
In the next episode, I attend the Pride in Greensboro. It's being held in the main street of Greensboro, just around the area of the Civil Rights Museum.
Yes, that's, I think, one of the crown jewels of North Carolina.
Right where the sit-in movement started in the 60s.
During the 1960s, in the height of the Civil Rights movement in America, there were what's referred to as the sit-in movement, and one of the most important
These were the sit-ins were black people going into restaurants that were whites only and just sitting there non-violently.
Exactly. So back in the day, restaurants and almost every public place was segregated. And the place where these sit-ins took place in Greensboro, and what is now the home of the International Civil Rights Museum, was at the time a lunch place called Woolworth's. And some students from A&T, and I'm sure there were other people from the community, but mainly the A&T students went and sat at the counter for weeks. They did this for weeks, and they had all sorts of horrible things done to them. Like you said, they were sitting there non-violently. That was the thing. Not to disrupt or be violent, but just to be there. And people would come and pour ketchup on their head and insult them and just try to get them to do everything they could to make them leave. But they persevered and were supported by that community and until the lunch counter was integrated. I believe, and people should look up the history on their own because I don't know exact dates of things, but this went on throughout the summer. I do remember from going through the exhibit, the school year ended and some of the students stayed and continued the sit-ins throughout the summer. Mm-hmm. And I believe it took several months, but eventually Woolworths did integrate their lunch counter. And that in turn sparked a lot of other of those same kinds of sit-in movements. It kind of spread.
And if people have seen enough in North Carolina, they could definitely drive north to this part. Oh my God, it's so beautiful here.
It's pretty. We're coming up on the Blue Ridge Parkway in a few miles.
So I guess it's kind of the same landscape I would see going into Blue Ridge at Asheville.
Exactly, yes. This is very much like the Blue Ridge Parkway, and we're going to hop on the parkway for just a couple miles, but this is very similar, except not as much even of this stuff that we're seeing now, which is just some lumber yards and things like that.
Davina and I are driving to a small town called Floyd. It's actually kind of funny. I'm house-sitting Davina's house, and at the same time she's house-sitting herself. That's because she's a writer and wanted to get away from her everyday life to do some work.
Mm-hmm. I am treating this house sit as a writing retreat. I won't have phone service. And Floyd either has no stoplights or maybe there's one. It's more about the outdoor activities in Floyd. Apparently there's a lot of hiking and whitewater rafting and outdoor stuff that you can do there. But I am just planning on getting a lot of work done, and the place where I'm staying is a beautiful cabin on 11 acres. It has a hot tub, it has a labyrinth, and miles of shady gravel road that runs parallel to the Blue Ridge Parkway. So I'm a runner, and I'm really looking forward to just my runs during the day, in the morning, and a lot of riding all day, and then soaking in that hot tub at night.
Oh, that sounds good.
Too bad you have to house sit my place. No hot tub.
Well, it's all about the change of scenery, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
Because you could technically do all that except for the hot tub at your place, but
yeah.
And you have 2 dogs, and up there you have what was it? 2 cats and a dog.
2 cats and 1 dog. Yes. Yeah. And this dog, at home I have a routine, and the dogs take up a lot of my time. I have 2 very active dogs, and they need a lot of exercise. And so I spend a lot of time walking them and making sure they have what they need. Even though I will have some pets to look after here, they're going to be low maintenance, more low maintenance than my home situation. Mm-hmm. The dog has 11 acres to roam, so he's just going to be free during the day. And 1 cat is old and 1 cat is an outside cat. So I won't have to spend 2 hours a day walking everyone like I do at home.
So what you're saying is your house sit is better than mine?
Exactly. Pretty much. You're right. It is about the change of scenery. That's the wonderful.
That's why I do it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Trusted House Sitters has been amazing. Being a travel writer, the most expensive thing is lodging, for me anyway. And so this is a great way for digital nomad type people and people that can work remotely to stay on the move. But but not always on the move. Like we were discussing earlier, I like the house sits where you can come and do for a couple of weeks or even a month, because it's really hard to keep up with your work when you're having to constantly move to a new place every day or every other day. So
the 3 weeks I did the road trip where I was moving every second day, I didn't get any work done. So
yeah,
well, I could technically, but then I wouldn't have time to roam around Nashville and Chicago and all those great places I were. So then, and I didn't go to Nashville to sit behind my computer all the time.
Exactly. And when you're in the travel business, whether it be a writer or having a podcast like you or whatever, that roaming around and kind of just seeing what you can get into is also work. You know, that's when I get some of my best story ideas. It's just being out and about, talking to people and asking questions, and people will think, oh, this is just some minute detail and it's not important. It's like, oh no, that's the story. That's a great story. And to them, it's just some random detail that is part of their town that they've seen all their life. You're like, no, this is the thing.
That was almost it for this episode. Something special will happen in this podcast feed in the next few weeks. I'll tell you what in a minute. But before that, let me remind you that this episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotels around the world. You should try it. Hotels25.com. Also, I want to tell you that I would be so thrilled if you would give me some stars in Apple Podcast or in your podcast app. And if you have a few minutes, please write a few lines in a review. It helps other people find this podcast. You can reach me on mail if you have any feedback or questions or tips for me on what to see and who to talk to when I get to a new destination. I promise that I'll answer any email I get on mail@theradiovagabond.com. You can follow me real time, where I am right now, on the official Facebook page, facebook.com/PalaRadioVagabond, and on Instagram and Twitter as Radio Vagabond. Find all these links at theradiovagabond.com, where you can also see a lot of pictures. If you're interested in the nomadic lifestyle and thinking of becoming a travel blogger, you might want to listen to the episode that I will post on Friday. Here I speak to the CEO and co-founder of TBEX Travel Media Conferences. I just attended my 4th TBEX in upstate New York and met Rick Calvert.
More creators are making a real living, right? There are a lot more people being successful that way, so that is fantastic. A lot more tourist boards and brands understanding the value and really wanting to work with them.
If you're only interested in my journey and the destinations I visit, you can skip that one. And next Monday, there'll be another episode here from North Carolina where I attend the Greensboro Pride and speak to a transgender woman.
Hot boys getting naked in the water, I love it. That's what Pride is all about, for sure.
And meet a guy with a cross trying to preach that being gay is a sin.
They're misleading people. People don't understand the truth. And so I was saying earlier when I was preaching that the Bible teaches Old and New Testament to fear God.
All this and much more next Monday. My name's Palabeau. See ya.